You must forgive me. Don't look so surprised, perplexed and eager to be gone. Balancing on your hands or on the tightrope, you would rather run than walk, rather climb than run, rather leap from a height than anything.
Sheldon Lee Cooper. Genius savant. Occasionally, young. No matter how you choose to describe Sheldon, he remains one of the most recognizable characters of the 21st century for his leading role in The Big Bang Theory and CBS's greatest gift to mankind, Young Sheldon. But something feels off. While the two shows are narratively part of the same canon, they feel disjointed from one another, and that is down to the partially titular Sheldon. The Sheldon we meet in The Big Bang Theory is, in many ways, more impulsive than his younger counterpart. This raises an important question. Why does the adult Sheldon seem less emotionally developed than the young Sheldon we see in Young Sheldon? If we look at the two shows through a Freudian lens, the most compelling argument that can be made is that Sheldon's psyche is fractured from trauma. He doesn't have a true ego, but rather something that works in its place as a shield to protect him from further harm. He seems quite egotistical on a surface level, but this is an obfuscation of his true nature. In this lens, Young Sheldon becomes more than just a prequel series. It's a retroactive justification of Sheldon's character, an insight into his developmental journey. In Freudian psychology, the personality is built up of 3 different parts: id, ego, superego. The id is driven by basic instinct and desire, existing from birth and establishing an individual's wants. For Sheldon, this manifests as a need to have his own way, despite how it might impact those around him, a childlike impulse that seeks gratification. The superego is an aspect of the self that is pulled from external parameters like wider society, creating a rigid morality that defines one's rules and boundaries. Sheldon's superego is seen in his need for perfection and a stringent set of rules. He is dictated by his sense of logic. The ego, developed in early childhood, mediates between id and superego. It takes its desires and impulses and achieves them in a socially acceptable way, appeasing the superego's rules. Sheldon's psyche lacks this mediating ego. Rather, it manifests differently, pushing id and superego to their extreme. To understand Sheldon's psychological makeup, and to see how Young Sheldon retroactively establishes this, it is important to look at those who influenced Sheldon in early life, and how they would have helped these aspects of the self develop. Meemaw is the external driver behind Sheldon's id. Her nature as the cool grandma, and her innate tendency to follow her own desires reflects on Sheldon. Her push for rule-breaking and a pleasure-first lifestyle results in her indulging Sheldon in many ways Mary and George do not, going along with his way of acting because he is special. The philosophy of Meemaw and of id says that life should be enjoyed on your own terms. And Sheldon takes from this his entitlement, an expectation that everything should serve his preferences, stems from his sense of id. What Sheldon's pleasure impulses say are that his needs prioritize the needs of others because he is more important. The rules of others and society must bend to Sheldon to make him happy. Meemaw breaks the rules to do what she wants. Sheldon expects the rules to break to do what he wants. In contrast, Mary defines Sheldon's superego. As a devout Christian, she expresses herself through her adherence to the Bible's teachings, and the strict morality that comes with that. Her rigidity reflects in her relationship with Sheldon. He is her golden child, and must be exceptional and perfect in every way, even when there is evidence to the contrary. The philosophy of Mary and of superego says that life is defined by one's beliefs and structures. And Sheldon takes from this his perfectionism, that is his adherence to his worldview. Logic, science, and order is absolute. He is uncompromising in his structures and schedules because that is what makes his world make sense. Mary's Christian beliefs form her moral absolutes. Sheldon sees a world of absolutes and lets logic lead him. George Cooper Sr., father of Sheldon Lee Cooper, All-American football coach, Vietnam veteran. George Sr. was a bastion of wisdom and calm in the chaos of a suburban sitcom drama. And by acting as this for Sheldon, he assumed the role of the boy's ego prototype. The ego tends to be learned from one's guardians, as we see them put in place boundaries that give us what we want in measured amounts. And young Sheldon, being placed at an ego-forming age, took this from George Sr. George was a practical man, offering a gentle but firm approach to parenting that Sheldon did not get otherwise. Where Mary smothered Sheldon and treated him as a perfect golden child, George gave Sheldon the freedom to make mistakes and learn. Where Meemaw enabled Sheldon's desires, George put in place boundaries to prevent Sheldon from expecting the world on a silver platter. This worked. We see in young Sheldon that Sheldon often had a more balanced psyche than he did in adulthood, simply by the guiding hand of George, allowing him to navigate his increasingly complex state of self. George was the framework of Sheldon's ego. He balanced Mary's rigidity and Meemaw's indulgence to allow Sheldon to find equilibrium between the two in a healthy manner. But I've been using past tense for the last few minutes, and that is in reflection of the unfortunate and untimely death of George Cooper Sr., and with him the chance of healthy development for Sheldon's ego. With the death of his father, Sheldon is left with no grounding force. His psyche is left to run rampant with unrestrained id and superego. His ego-stabilizing force being removed causes Sheldon's ego to simply stop. Losing his father is the moment that emotional continuity between young Sheldon and the Big Bang Theory snaps. Sheldon is caught in superposition between his id and superego. Like his mother and grandmother, both are dominating forces in his life in different directions. Two important parts of himself that are contrasting and competing for superiority. As a child and as an adult, he is simultaneously confident, irrational, insecure, dependent, reliant. While an ego usually balances the id and superego to make a grounded worldview, Sheldon is left devoid of proper mediation between these contrasting poles. A void is left in Sheldon Lee Cooper. What should have been a stabilizing force that every child needs is simply nothing. And this is externalized through the representations of id and superego in Sheldon's life. Meemaw, after George's death, doubles down on her indulgences. Likewise, Mary doubles down on her religious rules. Losing his father in his childhood meant that Sheldon was never given the opportunity to develop a healthy ego, and this trauma echoes through into his adult life. The way Sheldon acts at the beginning of The Big Bang Theory is a direct result of his father's death and his consequential unformed psyche. Sheldon here is uncompromising and endlessly pushing to be superior. The smartest man in the world. For example, his routines and rules must be followed to an absolute. Bathroom schedules and roommate agreements, chief amongst them. This is his id, his wants and desires for the world to cater to him, driving his need for stability. And on the other side of this Cooper coin, his systems are the most correct, taking precedence above any other. His unwavering belief in physics, putting down any other schools of thought, is the most prominent interpretation. This is his superego, reinforcing his position as the smartest man in the world. Sheldon, in his adulthood, is fully committed to defending his mental framework by leaning completely into his id and superego. They take the place of ego, forming an ego substitute of sorts, competing rather than being mediated. How does Sheldon's ego substitute play into his life? It restructures reality to protect Sheldon from the pain of losing his father and thus his stability at an early age. Rather than finding compromise between his id and superego, it instead desires to protect him and justify his own world. a form of ego stunting, stopping him from growing out of necessity because he cannot handle the change. His strict rules, driven by his desire to have his way and defined by his stringent systems, are a way of shielding himself from things not going his way and maintaining a sense of control. He uses his ego as a shield, not as a way of interacting with the world, using the systems he puts in place and the things he believes in to avoid being vulnerable around others. Because his true ego stopped developing at such an early age, it is fragile and prone to being damaged. When Sheldon cannot follow through with his routines, he is overwhelmed and crashes out because he has lost the stability his ego substitute is fighting to maintain. This superior self-image is his id and superego, trying to compensate for his non-existent ego that cannot rationalize the world around him. In creating this superiority complex, he avoids confronting emotional situations, a way of bypassing his ego which is not up to the challenge. All of this is reflected in his narrations in Young Sheldon, a way for Sheldon to look back on his childhood and understand how those experiences impact him so many years later. Sheldon, at this point in the Big Bang Theory canon, has left behind his ego substitute and can therefore rationalize how it impacted him at those points in time. But how did adult Sheldon reach the point of self-reflection that we see in Young Sheldon? Over the course of the Big Bang Theory, Sheldon's true ego manifests. The developments and interactions in his life give Sheldon a chance to begin to develop the ego he never got a chance to fully form. His sense of social reality is stimulated and developed through his close friends. His friendships with Raj, Howard, most importantly, Leonard, force him to learn what is and isn't socially acceptable. They challenge the behaviors of his superiority complex and often show him that he cannot always have his way without upsetting those he is meant to care about. They mitigate his id, forcing him into situations where he is not always going to get his way, and must compromise if he is to maintain their friendship. His rigidity and devotion to his systems and worldviews is challenged and broken by Penny. Penny, being separated from the scientific world and not invested in the same types of pop culture as him, forces him to confront the fact that people can and will exist outside of his structures. She mitigates his superego, talking to him candidly and removing him from the enclosed bubble his world exists within. Finally, his romantic relationship with Amy is the effective final step in Sheldon's ego forming in a way that allows it to function as it should. His love for Amy and his desire to make her happy breaks Sheldon's often self-serving worldview in a way that forces him to abandon his comforts, like taking the step to be intimate with her. Steps such as these are him finally being able to move away from his ego substitute controlling his life. Sheldon, to make Amy happy, must make compromises, which forces him to compromise between his id and superego, thus ensuring the development of a well-rounded ego. And all of this is nowhere more apparent than in the final episode of The Big Bang Theory, when Sheldon and Amy are awarded the Nobel Prize. In his acceptance speech, Sheldon concludes that the prize is not his alone, but that he was only able to achieve it thanks to those around him who supported him to this point. His family, his friends, his wife. This embrace of emotion over logic, an act otherwise unseen between the two shows, is the final step in the conclusive formation of Sheldon's ego. Sheldon, in the highest achievement of his life, finally develops the ego he lost as a child. Sheldon, throughout most of his life, has been caught in superposition between his id and superego. Unable to balance the two after the early death of his father, the embodiment of his ego. This formed the architect of Sheldon's personality in adulthood, an ego substitute that he used as a shield to defend himself from his early trauma. His story is not one of scientific brilliance. It is one of emotional development and healing.
I'd like to say we could be friends, but the truth is we have nothing in common beyond a few shared years. I won't keep you then. God knows I have fears enough for us both. I leave you in an ecstasy of concentration, slowly peeling a ripe scab from your knee, to taste it on your tongue.
What's up, gamers? Thanks for watching. It was a crazy little video. I hope you learned something new about Sheldon.
and his young counterpart. Ooh. Some real nice comments on my last video, like this one, or that one. Thanks for leaving them. If you want to leave some comments on this one, then maybe you're like and subscribe. It'd be appreciated. Bye.